Welcome back to Patrons Golf. It's another week with a signature event. Hopefully, this one is much better viewing and I guess more gravitating than the last one we had, which was the Cadillac Championship. We're back at Quail Hollow. We're a week away from the PGA Championship. We're going to see a really tough course, a better field, in my opinion. We're going to lose Scotty, but it's a better field overall. And I think this is going to be much better than what we were forced to sit through at Doral. We'll quickly go through. One of the things I really like to do is go through, I guess, my approach. And we'll see how it kind of stacked up with how the week played out. This was a bit of a disappointing week for me, if I'm being honest. Look, I took the same approach that I did with the Heritage. I thought the Heritage and the Cadillac were going to be Scotty events. I am always kind of wary of the fact that you're kind of going to get Scottied, 4 or 5 times a year, and I typically am okay with that. But if there's an event where or a course setup where I think really strongly that this is it, I do kind of protect myself a little bit. I won't take as many shots as I will. I guess I'll play guys a little bit less in terms of like a liability. But look, for the Heritage and for the Cadillac, I basically said, all right, cool. I want one guy in the top betting group, and then I want a few guys with a bit of value. Where I'm disappointed is I was tossing up between Chris Gotterup and Siwoo Kim as that guy in I guess the top portion of the betting board. Ultimately went with Gotterup. I'm disappointed in that, obviously, because Gotterup was fairly awful at Doral, a course which he really, on paper looked to be a really good fit for. Um, Siwoo ends up having a really nice week. Doesn't win. No one was beating Cam this week, as he goes wire to wire. But I think it's still a really good practice to go and look at your approach and be critical, even if it makes absolutely zero difference to like what you win lose for the week. So yeah, I'm a little bit disappointed in the fact that I kind of, for the second signature event in a row, was like, nope, Scotty's going to get me here. And I kind of went into a little bit of protective approach. And I missed out on Siwoo Kim, who had a really good week and would have been a nice bet to ride, much better than Goddard for sure. But yeah, that was disappointing. My main guy kind of, being non-existent. And then the other two guys that I thought had really good value, a bit of a mixed bag. Seb Straka finishes fourth in the end, has a really nice fourth round. Annoying because I did play him at the 365 three-place enhanced market. So I miss out on that. But look, at the price I got him at, he did everything I thought he would do. And to be honest, if you had said to me the start of the week he'll finish fourth, I would have taken that. Obviously, wouldn't have bet him in the three-way market, but yeah, look, I can't be upset with that. He had a really good week, and to be honest, I think we're heading to a course which is probably another good spot for him. He won this event last year, albeit at a different track, but this is this is a this is a guy who I think is probably priced pretty pretty poorly at certain venues. So I wouldn't fault people for taking that. Corey Connors was pretty much nowhere. I don't remember seeing him on the broadcast at all. And look, this one was largely a price-based play. He was just too big in the market at where he was at, and you know my my kind of my reasoning is, yeah, look, he's got some really nice numbers on comp courses. Kind of those bigger courses, the ones where you can kind of get away with, I guess, not being lights out with the putter, which he's not. But yeah, look, he never really fired too much and was never really in contention. But look, I got him at a big price. I'll take that shot. And that is about the Cadillac. That's probably way too much time on it, to be honest, with how horrible it was. So moving on. This week, the Truist played at Philadelphia Cricket Club last year, returns to Quail Hollow after it was used for the PGA Championship last year. And look, this is such a brute of a course. It's a heavyweight. It's going to demand power, precision, patience all week. It's par 71, stretches over 7,500 yards, and it's one of the longest and probably toughest tests you'll see. It's not going to be a birdie fest. Um, distance off the tee is obviously it's a massive advantage. The Bombers are going to have to take some aggressive lines, but if you're not a big hitter, your approach distances are going to be massive. So guys off the tee who have really, really strong weeks, it's no surprise that they do well here. I think this is probably one of the actually the most predictable courses in terms of, I guess, what success looks like. So yeah, you see larger approach shots in that kind of 175 to 200 range and above. And yeah, greens and regulation becomes so much more important. Scrambling becomes more important. Three putt percentage goes up. It is, it's just a brute. If the distance wasn't a problem, the greens and the large undulating complexity of them really does kind of, I guess, complete the puzzle. The finishing stretch as well, the Green Mile as they call it. This is a pretty tough one, and I'm going to get into a little bit of what this might look like on Sunday because I do think it's a little bit interesting. You know, the 18th is completely brutal. Really tough approach shot in. And this one is absolutely just about survival on these last three holes. Most of these holes will play over par for the entire week every day. The par fives won't, but pretty much every other hole will. You can almost bet on that. And yeah, the 16, 17, 18 is gonna catch a few. So I think we'll look at the weather. So this is Charlotte Airport, which is not too far away from the course, but look, there's actually nothing major in terms of wind gusts or anything. Like I'm not super worried about the rain. What kind of I wouldn't say excites me, but I think this is interesting here. We don't really have massive wind gusts until Sunday, late Sunday. So I think that's exciting. And if you look at the wind direction there, I do think it's interesting because what it will do is if we look at 17, so that wind direction there is going to be pushing that ball kind of into your face, in towards the water. And then even 18, that's going to create a little bit of problem. 16 as well, that's pushing it again towards the water. And so, look, it's already a tough finishing stretch. And if that if those wind conditions come in a little bit earlier, uh, the last few groups could really get hit with that and see those three holes at its absolute worst for the week. So look, that obviously can change. I'm not from a betting perspective, like there's nothing really you can do. Like for now, it's more one of those things. It's just to watch at this point, but I do think it's interesting to see how that plays out because you could be holding a really nice ticket and just see it absolutely capitulate in the last moment. So something to monitor as the week goes on. The field. So signature event, 72 players, no cut, 700 points for the winner and a massive purse, which does feel like it's going to be unsustainable going into next year. Notable inclusions, we've got Rory, we've got Fitz, Ludwig and Xander back. And we're losing Scotty, Colin, Russell. And I put Jake Knapp in there. He technically was in the field last week, but withdrew with a wrist injury. Look, we're not losing too much more outside of that. But yeah, four good guys coming back, which is always good. I think it's one of the fact that this was played as the PGA Championship last year, it was obviously going to be set up a little bit different. I don't know how different it really was set up. Maybe a little bit longer, maybe the rough's a little bit thicker, but it's probably not too different. But I wanted to see, I guess, the scoring average between, the PGA Championship and I guess what the typical, you know, the Truist Championship, how that kind of plays. And if you look at it, it's really not. There's a lot of difference, I guess, when you factor in each hole. Like every hole was playing harder for the PGA Championship. But I think one of the things that stands out to me is that even with the, I guess, rollback setup, if you want to say that, I definitely don't think it's can be considered a rollback kind of setup, but it's still going to play over par. Um, you see, there's a couple of par fours which are going to be holes where I guess players really probably need to attack, and then like I mean, the first real birdie opportunity I think is probably this is the seventh. Like it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. It's going to play tough all week. So. Um, if we look at the previous results here and kind of how they just generally performed, so Scotty won last year at the PGA, won by I think 4 or 5 strokes. Tee to green first, off the tee sixth, approach ninth, around the green sixth, and putting 24th. And I think that we'll get into I guess what the success is for this week, but that's going to be a bit of a theme. Um, you need to really do like three things here. You need to drive the ball, you need to be sharp with your irons, and you need to putt. If you're if you have a bad week doing one of those things, you're nowhere. So yeah, top 10 finishes with I guess top 10 ranks in those. Tee to green, seventh, off the tee five, approach six. I think approach and off the tee is kind of the main one, if I'm being honest, and it is a little bit of a trend. Um, the scrambling is obviously super important. It's going to be important in almost any tournament, but I think what you'll see here is it's probably not as important. The approach play becomes probably much more important than that. You're not going to see guys miss a lot of greens and be in the final group come Sunday. You're going to need to hit so many greens on these massive approach shots that I can just see guys getting completely penalized and kind of making some big scores if they're not super sharp. Um, yeah, Wyndham off the tee 20th, approach first, and putting third, and around the green 38th, which kind of shows what I said in that year. Only two players who finished in the top 10 and tied had top 10 ranks in strokes gained around the green. Um, yeah, look, I'm not going to go through each of these years, but um, yeah, it kind of summarizes the core success for me, which is, I think it's one of the most predictable places to find success. You need to hit the ball long, you need to be sharp with your mid to long irons, and you need to putt. So I've basically gone, kind of I've picked five stats here. So I've gone strokes gained approach, strokes gained putting, strokes gained off the tee, driving distance as well. That's going to be an important one. An approach from 175 plus, right? I'm essentially just looking for guys who tick three boxes. Um, as I said, it's another signature event, and there's a lot of strength coming back in with Lander, Xander, Ludwig, Rory, Bobby Mack. I think he's back as well. There's really good guys coming back. So I don't think I really want to take the chance on, I guess, someone who does that, who does one of those three poorly in kind of the middle of the betting market. Um, you know, my focus is really going to be kind of guys who bomb it and hit greens. Uh, A few players I've got profiled early. Matt Fitzpatrick. This is an interesting one for me. So there's kind of like there's a group of five at the top of the betting market, uh, and for me, they're so far above. They're above the rest. So it's Rory, Cam, Xander, Ludwig, and Fitz. Fitz is the biggest price here, which doesn't really make sense to me. I got nothing against Ludwig. I mean, a guy who's had three wins and a second in his last five starts, has a second here previously, top 10, top 10 here last year in the PGA Championship. I don't understand how he's the biggest price. I'll happily take it at the price he is. So he's 18 to 1, 19 plus 1800, whatever you, whichever method you prefer. Some key ranks, third on approach, fourth off the tee, second in driver accuracy, second in bogey avoidance, seventh in scrambling. Like there's no part of his game that's weak. And I think if you look at the heritage, that was a place that you had to be really, really sharp with your approaches, and he beat Scotty, and he beat Scotty with maybe one of the best shots we've seen this year in the playoff hole. So for me, I'm more than happy to jump in at this price. I couldn't fault anyone for betting any of those top five guys. If your approach this week was, I'm going to take one or two of those guys, and that's it. I absolutely see that because of how I guess how much better these guys are than kind of the rest of the field for me. So yeah, I'll take Fitz at the bigger price, and I'll happily have one of those the big five going into this week. Next guy's Sam Burns. Not really someone I've typically bet a lot. I did bet him at Pebble Beach, and that kind of blew up, and maybe I was a little bit scarred from that. But over the years, I just haven't really bet Burnsy quite a lot, I feel. Yeah, one of the best putters on tour. I think one of the things that I really liked was seven strokes gained putting last year at the PGA Championship, which is just crazy numbers. Two top 20s in his last two starts here at Quail. And his driving numbers, are really strong. He's eighth in driving distance. Um, he's a he's not the biggest hitter, but he's one of those guys who's going to hit it long enough. So he's first in overall proximity. I like that. That's it's. I feel like someone like him really does profile in a week like this where it's going to be lower scoring because the putting is going to keep him. He's going to keep him relevant. He's gonna he's gonna make some big pars. He's gonna rip off some birdies that he probably shouldn't just because of the putting. So I think at the PGA Championship, the rest of the game was pretty rubbish and was kind of saved by the putter. But look, if the drive is on and he's just hitting greens, like I'll absolutely take a guy at this price at 48 who's probably in my opinion like a top five putter on the tour. So I really like that. I really like where he sits in that market, where he sits in the market compared to like some of the other guys. I think if you look at some of the players around him, you've got Ben Griffin, who I kind of spoke about, I think during the Masters as, I guess, someone to potentially watch after, just based on the fact that he is obviously struggling and, does kind of seem to be finding a little bit of form. I think I didn't want to bet him this week. And I kind of get into why with the next guy. But yeah, look, Burnsy at that price is pretty good for me. Next guy's Gary Woodland. I ended up taking Gary Woodland last week and I felt great about it until the weekend started and then everything kind of fell apart. But if you're talking about guys who kind of tick, three boxes, he does. 12th in approach, seventh in putting. We know what he does with the driver. So look, like at this price, like I don't see how you don't play it. I'm pretty happy to completely throw away, what happened in the weekend, as you'll probably see with the next guy. He was kind of priced in the same range as Ben Griffin last week. Ben Griffin takes a huge price jump and kind of puts himself in that 50s range, based on the fact that, he had a good weekend. And then, Woodland finds himself here probably based on the fact that he had the opposite weekend. I think, Ben Griffin, scrambled his ass off. And, that's a really good finish, but I don't think the price jumps probably justified. Yeah, look, it was an awful weekend for Woodland. He's he's someone that I think he's had previous, I wouldn't say success, but he's had a couple of good results previously at Quail. The last two were, I think, a top tied for 38th and miscut. So you throw those out. I think it's also important to acknowledge that, those last two results are kind of around that time when I guess he's everything that he was going through. The game wasn't where it is now. So at at 90, like absolutely sign me up. I'll take a shot there. Um, last guys, last guy's probably a bit of a tough one, but this is I'm just happy to take this shot at this price. So Penrith, I'll definitely be playing this in the top finishes mainly, but like I will have a little bit on him for the outright here. It's going to be a pretty tough ask for him, but to be honest, his last two starts at Quail, he's got T5 at the PGA and then T10 the year before that. He gained shots off the tee. The rest of the game is super, super streaky, and that's where we kind of need him to come into play here. Like Woodland, his Thursday, Friday at Doral was really good. Gained 3.5 strokes almost on his approach, 5.5 off the tee, and then he completely fell apart on the weekend. But I think the one thing that was almost a selling point for me was his game completely fell apart on the weekend, but it wasn't his putter's fault. Um, Typically, that is where he will lose things, but his putter was kind of just, I guess, what you would kind of hope for if you're betting him. Like it's not going to be amazing, but as long as it's not horrible, that's kind of all you want. So yeah, look, I'm happy to take a guy who's got really good course history here, really strong driving the ball, and we know it can be super streaky with irons, but when you catch him on that right day, um, anything's kind of possible. So yeah, look, it's an easy sell for me here at this price. Hope that the irons find themselves in a good week, and then you just hope that the putter survives. To be honest, but yeah, look, that's all we've got. Very exciting signature event, which I don't really say too often. Especially didn't say it last week, but obviously looking forward to the PGA Championship as well. We've got Myrtle Beach with Brooks Koepka, which will be almost probably more bet than this, if I'm being honest by myself. And then we've also got a live event as well, which just opens up another can of worms in the live saga. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Oh yeah, all the rankings are kind of based on the last 16 rounds of play. I think if you're going through I guess if you're going through this and trying to find some value, like there's a lot of different ways you can, I guess, dive into these key stats. I've just listed some ranks for the last 16 rounds here, but yeah, to be honest, I would look at, if you use the rabbit hole tool at the BetSperts Golf, you look at it in difficult conditions, look at it at, similar courses to Quail, change it up. Don't just go like the simple 16 rounds. You're going to find some guys kind of with I guess these different numbers in there. So Good luck if you're betting. And I'll see you for the PGA Championship next week.